demonstrate what happens when we strike the drum at other than a 90-degree angle. Okay? Now we can get an idea of this rebound. Now I'm going to raise the stick so the stick is now hitting at not at a 90-degree angle. And what I'm doing is I'm gradually losing the bounce. Let it fall free to the earth, no bounce. Here's 90-degree angle, plenty of bounce. Now, for every angle, there's an equal and opposite re-angle. When I come down and hit the drum at this angle, the energy from the stick wants to bounce off this way. It can't because, number one, it's tethered to my drumstick machine, and in real life the stick is tethered to your hand. What that does is translates into no bounce. So, very important to strike the drum at a 90-degree angle. Now here I am with actual drumsticks. Now, we're going to hold the stick between our thumb and our index finger, and we're going to use this joint in our index finger, and we're going to curl this part of our index finger under the stick and elongate it down the stick, like this. Now, when you look at my thumb, we're going to be pressing with this part of my thumb, not that part of my thumb. Once again, using this fulcrum analogy, the fulcrum of this joint is right here. That means I'm applying the most amount of mechanical pressure here. Now, notice how I'm not using that part of my thumb, I'm using that part of my thumb. If you use this part of your thumb, it'll kind of work, but you'll have to expend more energy to hold the stick with the same force than if you were to using this point on your thumb. Okay, the stick looks like this on top. When you look down at your hand, this is what you should be seeing. And notice how my thumb and my index finger are directly across from one another. It's very important. We don't want to hold the stick like this. We don't want to hold the stick like this. Okay, so thumb and index finger. I'm in this middle joint of the index finger. And now underneath, there's the tip of my index finger, and it's able to put a little bit of pressure just behind the fulcrum. These other three fingers are wrapped lightly around the stick, but they leave the stick room to bounce. So notice how I'm not doing this. The stick does hit the fingers, but the stick hits the fingers at the top of the motion. When the stick actually hits the drum head, it's free from these fingers, so it can actually rebound. Now, also notice that I'm holding the stick out the back of my hand. Notice that I'm not holding the stick with my fingers wrapped around the stick. You see these two views? This is bad, this is good. Now, one of the problems with holding the stick like this is the stick path. Now, watch what happens when I move my wrist straight up and down. You can see the tip of that stick goes around in a little ellipse. That means it's going to hit the drum at less than a 90-degree angle, and the rebound's going to be really funny. So when I hold the stick like this and move my wrist straight up and down, the stick will hit the drum at a 90-degree angle. I can tell you that once you begin to manipulate the stick with your fingers, that anybody who manipulates the stick with their fingers learns that this just doesn't work. Because when you try and move your fingers this way, the stick goes around in a little circle. And what has to happen is that when you hold the stick in your hand and you move your fingers this way, they have to throw the stick directly skyward so that the tip of the stick can go down. I have a little drummer exercise that I invented to help show you which muscles you're going to use when you start playing drums. Now, I want you to pretend you're holding a stick between your thumb and index finger. Now, these three fingers, we need to use these separately from these two fingers. These two fingers, their job is to hold the stick and apply a little bit of pressure on the stick. These three fingers need to be relaxed. Now, I talked to you about the wrist motion, and I want you to try this. Now, keep your fingers all relaxed and move your wrist straight up and down. And see how free-flowing your wrist is. Now, I want you to take all your fingers and tighten them. Okay, really put a lot of tension, squeeze your fingers, and now move your wrist up and down. You can see how the motion is really hard and kind of jerky. Now, the tendons that control these fingers go through this little area of your wrist. They're called carpals, and it's a little tunnel, and you've heard of carpal tunnel syndrome. So now, if you play the drums incorrectly and you play for long periods of time, you are going to end up with wrist problems, carpal tunnel problems. Now, here's the way to avoid that. Now, we want to keep these 3 fingers relaxed. Now, you have to imagine, and here's a simplistic view, we've got 5 little controlling devices going through our carpal tunnel. Okay, now if we have 5 of them, 5 all tense, we're going to have restricted motion. Now, we have to have 2 with a certain amount of tension, the thumb and the index finger, in order to hold the stick. So we can have 3 relaxed, so that's 2 tense and 3 relaxed. So now, as soon as we start tightening one of those fingers, like for instance, holding the pinky up, the pinky, what we're doing is now tightening up the tendon that holds this pinky up, and now we've got 3 tight and 2 relaxed. Okay, so here's the exercise. We're going to move these back 3 fingers on the stick. We're going to move these all together. Now, we need to learn to find the muscles to do this. Now, first I want you to move these fingers up from the top joint and just kind of wave them up and down. And I want you to do it without moving your index finger. You see that? So if you're doing this, you need to find what muscles control those 3 fingers and separate them from the muscles that control these 3 fingers. Now I want you to bend from this middle joint. Okay, so we're doing like little exercises. So we're bending from the end joint, bending from the middle joint. Okay, now we're going to take this top joint, bend the knuckles down, and then we're going to move from that middle joint. And what you should see happening is that the fingers are going to be hitting your palm. This is the motion that we use when we're playing drums. Here's a drumstick in my hand. Now, thumb and index finger across from the stick, and these 3 fingers work and push against the stick. Now, here's something that people used to do when they wanted to practice drums in the middle of the night. Held the stick backwards here. And try that at home, okay? We're going to hold the stick just like we normally do, except now it's hitting the upper side of my hand. Now, gravity is acting like the bounce of the drum. And you can see how I use my fingers here. Now, that's exactly how your fingers are going to work when you play on the drum. Looks like this. Now, if I play with my fingers alone, looks like this. And when we're learning to play drums, we're going to learn to use a combination of wrist and fingers. Now, the faster we go, the more we're going to use our fingers. Now, this wrist motion, you notice the wrist goes straight up and down, and once again, this is kind of a simplistic version of this, but you have to imagine curtain rods that you probably have in your living room. Okay, they've got 2 ropes, and you pull one rope down and the curtain's open, and you pull the other rope down and the curtain's closed. Open, close, open, close. Now, what happens if you pull from both sides? They don't go anywhere. Okay, now remember that image. Now, we have muscle groups that pull the wrist up while the muscle groups here relax. And then now these muscle groups that bring the wrist down flex while the top ones relax. So we're going flex, relax, flex, relax. So that's really what's going on when we play drums. Now, it doesn't take a lot of muscles to play drums. The sticks are perfectly light. It just takes muscles cooperating together. Now, what happens when the muscles stop cooperating, when you start playing too fast? When you watch kids who haven't mastered the art of playing drums, playing really fast, you'll see them starting to wave their arms. When you want to play fast, you actually have to use smaller muscle groups. So here we go. So that's Dr. Schaefer's theories of how you should hold the sticks. And I've thought about this a lot, and I'm basically thinking about science and rebound and angle of attack. So hope you enjoy this, and in the next edition we're going to talk about the correct drum stroke, and we'll talk about the rolls. Thanks for joining me.